the session Theories of Change and Conflict Escalation. My name is Sinan. I am from a collective, a climate justice collective in Portugal, in Lisbon. I'm originally from Turkey, but I have been involved in various movements and various kinds of organizing and various kinds of strategizing throughout my activist life. I was in the student movement in Turkey actively. I participated in NGOs, so standard institutional um, organizations. I was also involved in informal organizing, grassroots organizing, as well as party politics. So standard or orthodox party politics, revolutionary party politics. All of this had their own stages. I was very close to the Kurdish movement in Turkey, never in it, but very close in touch. So I also learned a lot from their experiences. And then since 2011, I live in Lisbon, so I was also part of the anti-austerity movement through the crisis in Europe. So I was also involved in the mass movements in Portugal with a different angle. And in any case, I have been doing international contact work for Climaximo in the European climate movement. So I'm also well aware of what is going on in different parts of Europe and what kind of approaches are taken. So I'm telling you all of this because this is where kind of this training comes from. This session or this presentation, this way of presenting comes from, because it kind of interpolates various types of approaches of how change happens, what is supposed to be done, what works, why do we think certain things work, and so on. So this presentation is original in the sense that it is not taken from somewhere. It was made out of scratch. However, you will find a lot of parallels with other things that you may have heard of about theories of change. Conflict escalation is a term that comes from Martin Luther King Jr. So it's not, we're not inventing from scratch, but the presentation itself is unique. It has two blocks, as the title suggests: theories of change and conflict escalation. Inesh will be doing the first part and I will be doing the second part. So I'll try to share my screen, and if and when that works, I will pass on to Inesh. Inesh, can you confirm if everything is fine? The screen share?
I think the screen share is fine here.
Perfect. So then I'll pass on to Inesh.
Thank you, Sinan. So hi everyone, I'm Inez. I'm from Climaximo. I've been a climate justice activist for about 2 years now, but these 2 years seem like much longer since I've never learned so much in my life as during these 2 years. I'm very thrilled to be here today, and as Sinan said, I'm going to be presenting the first part of the session about theories of change. So let's start. So when we talk about change, we presuppose the existence of a reality which by some reason doesn't satisfy our needs. So we therefore want to transform it according to a specific objective that we have in mind. Something like this can happen on everyday life, on everyday basis. So for example, to keep your house clean, you talk to your flatmates. To fix, for example, a relationship problem, you speak with the person you have a relationship with, of course. To get less hungry, you might eat a sandwich. To be able to present a workshop on theories of change, you probably will study some stuff. In activism, we can find various examples according to different organizational layers. For example, for a political party, change might be, let's say, to bring down capitalism. For a civil society organization, a political change, like, for example, energy democracy. When we're talking about a campaign, it can be, for example, a policy change or a change to an already existent law. And when we're talking about an action, our objective might be to create strong and beautiful images. When we think about these objectives, we ask ourselves about which actions work better to take us towards these objectives. The answer to this question is our theory of change. So in this sense, we can think of 4 kinds of actions. I think, Sinan, you can go to the next slide. I'm not seeing the next slides, but
You are not. That's a problem.
No.
Stop share and start over. Sorry.
It's okay. Just a hiccup.
So you see the slides, and then I'll do this, and I'll do this. No?
Nothing happened.
Yeah, I know. But it's because it is here.
Okay, nice. So I was saying that we can find, concerning our theory of change, we can find 4 kinds of actions. We can find mobilizing, organizing, raising awareness, and negotiating. So let's go through them one by one. So about organizing, about mobilizing, mobilizing can be exemplified by protests, actions, strikes, campaigns, insurrections. It's basically everything that involves bringing people to the streets to face something, some kind of power. About organizing, what we do in organizing are meetings, open assemblies, networking, alliances, several kinds of groups, organizations, or parties, or even organizing petitions. In here, we're talking about having a bunch of people and making them work better together. Raising awareness. We have, for example, having stands in events, media coverage for an event or an action, debates, lectures, articles, and videos. We're talking about giving information about something. And as examples of negotiation, we have lobbying, reports, studies, the kind of institutionalization or professionalization that happens, and you're going to be engaging directly with the status quo and appeal to reason. We identified 4 different poles associated with these kinds of actions. The first one is about disruption. In this pole, we have a strong conflict of interests, and the status quo doesn't show any kind of flexibility. Here, the solution would have to be a strong mobilization to force the status quo to actually compromise. The second pole is empowerment associated with organization. In this case, there are 2 unequal powers. If you organize the less powerful, you make the most powerful given to your demands, hopefully. Representativeness is associated with raising awareness. Here you believe that the people affected by the change are themselves the actual agents of change. If you persuade them by raising awareness and giving them information, then change will derive from there. So in here, we're talking about a belief that society corresponds to the opinions of individual people, and you believe in the power of individual actions. For last reason associated with negotiation, there's practically no conflict of interests between what you want and the status quo. So sharing the information and appealing to rational arguments brings the change through negotiation. We can organize these actions and corresponding poles in two axes. One of them, on one side, we have we can and will convince those who make decisions. On the other side, we have to confront those who make decisions. So on one side, there's a capacity to actually convince political decision makers, and on the other side, there's a need to confront them because they can't be convinced. The other axis has a need to act against the status quo on one side, and the capacity to reform it on the other. So about this scenery, these don't consist exactly of boxes. They are more like poles. Each event and organization, we can think about any event and organization and articulate it between these poles with different weights. And so we've been talking about some concepts that might seem a bit abstract. So let's jump on to some examples of how these movements or actions move between poles in accordance to their objectives. So we might think of a creative flash mob. In that example, you are mobilizing people to actually raise awareness towards a subject. But then you have something the other way around. When you make school presentations, let's say about the climate crisis, for example, with Fridays for Future or something like that, you're generally raising awareness with the aim of mobilizing people, making them go directly to a mobilization or a strike. For example, an open letter to decision makers counts on raising awareness and publicity around a certain theme so that you can build some pressure to negotiate with decision makers. XR talks are a way to raise awareness towards organizing people into groups. And the following step is actually normally to get them to go to trainings to prepare them for civil disobedience actions. Another way we can use this board is trying to place specific actions on it. So, for example, the Gezi Park protests in Turkey focused essentially on mobilizing. The fight for $15, the fight for a minimum wage in the US, involves a mixture of organizing and mobilizing on a setting in which the need to confront decision makers is not very high because the challenge to the status quo is not it's not a profound, a deep break with the status quo. A climaxal meeting, one of our meetings, is aimed mostly at organizing and empowering people towards action. In the people's climate case, for example, we see a belief that we can prevent climate change through negotiation by taking EU institutions to court. The Russian Revolution is another example, an extreme one concerning the fact that it's an articulation also between mobilization and organization, but in a setting in which the confrontation level and the break with the status quo is much greater. In a climate activism training, it is made to raise awareness and also to organize, in a sense, in a setting in which we need to take action against the status quo and to challenge it. And ReFood, for example, organizes to avoid food waste. It doesn't exactly break with the status quo. We can put movements and groups into shapes in this configuration. I prefer to call them shapes than balls because the shapes that appear are not entirely balls. We can look at PETA, for example. We can look at trade unionism, at NGO campaigns, the Climate Action Network, yellow unions or company unions, and we can see how they can be placed concerning these axes and these different poles that we're referring to. And we can look at also at some extremes. For example, In V for Vendetta, mobilization takes place with no need of prior organization and with an assumed awareness of the problem. When we're talking about community centers and discussion groups, we're focused uniquely on empowerment of communities, like running a website or, for example, a meme page is about raising awareness and representativeness. And NGOs in UN conferences discussing the use of shall, should, will is an extreme example connected to the negotiation and reasoning process. We have some other examples. The 25th of April in Portugal represents a severe challenge to the status quo and the merging of mobilization and organization, just like what happens with ACT UP. Both of these didn't need a specific legal path or pre-thought of legal path, neither a media coverage, neither initial awareness. Then we have spontaneous actions, which are an extreme of taking action against the status quo between disruption and the idea of representativeness. Of course, it needs organizing to be sustainable, otherwise you won't have people to actually mobilize, and these include some social massacres. We have big greens on the other side as an extreme between empowerment and reason, in which you are not particularly changing the status quo. And think tanks and environmentalists are between representativeness and reason. So, as we have seen, two questions guide our theory of change, two main questions, which are the size of the problem that we're facing and the flexibility of the status quo. And it is very rare for a single action to bring change, the change we're aiming at. So generally, to get to our objectives and to our intended change, we need a very specific combination of actions. We're talking about strategy here, and strategy is exactly that sequence of diverse actions, of diverse tactics, which can take us towards our objective. It is something that we actually, or hopefully, reflect upon, and which we consciously build. And very often we have to adapt it and change it. It's very important to evaluate our strategies and confront them with reality and with our actual theory of change to realize if they are being useful and if they are adequate towards the reality we have and the problems we mentioned earlier. Our strategies are always informed by our theory of change, and Sinan is going to develop on these and on why and how our strategies need to be adapted and the importance of escalation, just as some issues faced by social movements concerning these matters and some useful tools to invest in. So I pass on to you, Sinan.
Yes, thank you, Ines. So the theory of change that you have is about like, I'll do these things and thereby I will solve a problem, right? So I think at this point, I would invite everyone to think about where you're coming from and what kind of organizations you participate in, and what do you think that these organizations think about how to make change, right? This may be explicit in some cases, but it may also be, in most of the time, it's actually implicit. No one actually talks about it. It's an assumed cultural background on which we build. So now I will talk about stages of escalation. Escalation is a concept that comes from the civic rights movement, which generally assumes that there's a conflict which is implicit, and by escalating this conflict, you bring it to real life, you bring it to the surface, and then it becomes visible, and therefore it is solvable now, because previously it wasn't visible. So it starts with step 0, which says change is necessary. Most of the time, change is necessary and you just solve it. Sometimes it happens that status quo fails to implement that change. So, but most of the time you realize, oh, I'm starving, so I'll just cook and eat. So status quo solves the problem. But sometimes status quo fails to implement the change. And then the first thing to do about this is that you raise awareness of the problem. So that's the first thing you do. You talk to people, you inform other people that there's a problem. And you have to reach out to a sufficient amount of people to then form small groups where this works, right? And here you can already bring the problem to the public agenda. So people are talking about it. So already a group, a good amount of people are talking about it. There are loads of things that can happen before you reach to kind of creating small groups or whatever, like some of the examples that Inej was giving. If you're sharing a house and if someone is not doing the cleaning, it's just a matter of reaching to that person and that solves the problem generally. And sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes maybe you want to make a meeting in your room, in your house with your roommates, and then find a solution of why things were going wrong. But in any case, you're bringing the problem to the public agenda. So that's the first level of visibility that we give to the problem. So far we just created the problem, it existed, but now it's in real life and it may be solved. At this early stage, it may be solved. So for instance, it used to happen, now it happens less, that in radio, there were announcements for looking for blood. Some hospital needs some special, very rare kind of blood. And if enough people know it, it's automatically solved. At least that was what was assumed. Like this was the only way to solve this problem anyway. If enough people know, someone will come and help. Another thing is unnoticed problems happen this way. So there's a garbage bin in your street that the municipality is not taking away, not cleaning. There was a mistake, there was a miscommunication. So you just or it is something is broken on your street. So if enough people know about it, then the municipality, the city hall may act on it, right? So any unnoticed problem can be solved by just making it visible enough. When it is not the case, then people start organizing to form what's called interest groups. So these are all kinds of small collectives based on a particular problem, collectives, organizations, associations that are based on a particular, defending on particular change, right? And then obviously to do that, you go back to raising awareness and you collect people. And many ways, and some people do this through petitions, which is write down what the problem is and see who agrees with you. Also, through that text, explain it to more people, right? So this is how you create a dynamics of like bring it to public agenda, but also creating some kind of organization through this process. So far we are in stage 5, I'll say, organized to form interest groups. And here, this interest group can negotiate change with the status quo, and it may be solved. Oops, very good. Yes, now it's better. So this can happen, for instance, if there is a serious, it happens a lot when there is a pollution problem and loads of people come, write a petition, deliver it to someone, and that person looks at it and says, right, I agree, this is ridiculous. This should have been solved before, and they solve it. So they can just negotiate change in an early stage. When that doesn't happen, then people start going to the streets to demonstrate their interest or manifest their will to achieve change. So this is the first stage of mobilizing. These can be small protests, gatherings, public events, and things like that. And in order to do that, of course, you would talk to these small groups and gather them through networking, what's called networking. So you would organize these protests. So a good example is when there is, let's say, when there is a mine somewhere that is polluting the river, generally there are small groups in all of the villages and cities that are affected. So networking would join these small groups. Or when there is in university level, for instance, when there is an increase in tuitions, there are groups in each school that are organized slowly. So a protest would join these people together and go to the streets altogether, right? So this is the kind of thing that I'm considering. So we reach to mobilization, and at this point, status quo can compromise. It happens a lot. It depends on a lot of aspects. It may be that the status quo is relatively flexible. It may also be that there are elections next week. It may be that the status quo is fragile. It has its own internal problems, so it cannot support problems outside, visible problems outside. So there may be many reasons for this compromise. It may also be they may just compromise as well. When that doesn't happen, then people start to organize to challenge the status quo, right? So at that point, you realize, okay, just talking doesn't work. These people are not listening. Perhaps there's a conflict of interest. So in that case, people start to organize to challenge the status quo. And to do that, you build campaigns, alliances, platforms, you create these large chunks where big change needs to happen. Maybe structural change needs to happen. Maybe policy change needs to happen. And then they mobilize at this point, they mobilize to disrupt, to make things different than they were before, kind of interrupt the business as usual, the things as they were. They cannot be as they were. We have to create an actual conflict so that things cannot go as they are, and we are there to stop them. So this is more or less the stages of escalation that I have in mind. And the way they fit into the image that Inez was saying is exactly this kind of inverse written Z for me, but I know that some people write it actually this way, from bottom to top. So the way this works is that you first collect information about the problem, and then you raise awareness about the problem. And through this awareness, if it is not solved, then you start organizing, right? And the more you organize, you realize that something has to happen, and then you go to mobilization. So this is the current of escalation. Obviously, organizations or movements in general may stop at any stage. They may stop because they think that they shouldn't escalate, they should negotiate at any point of this. Movements can stop this escalation because they are tired or because there's too much oppression and they give up. That's also a possibility. Another way that people can stop doing this is if they actually genuinely believe that the theory of change belongs to one of the poles and not to the mobilizing pole. It has to be touched somewhere else. So the problems in social movements, and when this is actually happening in real life, is that, so first we have this wonderful, we need more people loop, right? So when people are organized and they want to go to the street, there's always someone in your organization that says, we need more people. We are so little. We have to get more people. We need to organize more people, instead of asking what kind of mobilization is relevant with the people we have. So instead of breaking backwards, kind of say, okay, I understand that I need more people, but this shouldn't stop me from mobilizing. So I should be doing something now, and I should be organizing more and tend to do something more instead of just constantly organizing. This is one of the problems that I had in a political party in which I was. So I was recruited to that organization. Someone talked me into it, which was really nice. They were right. It was exactly that's how it's supposed to be. Then I said, fine, what do I do? They said, now you talk to more people. And I was like, then what? Then they said, then they talk to more people. And I was like, right, but like previously you didn't have me, now you have me. And tomorrow maybe you will have 3 more people. If this doesn't change anything in terms of what we do, then I don't understand how this is supposed to bring change, right? So this is the idea of like, okay, if we are 10 people, we should be doing something. If we are 100 people, we should be doing something else. So this is the kind of overruling this we need more people loop. Yeah. Another one that happens a lot is that people don't know. The information is not out there. People are ignorant. We have to inform people instead of asking, wait, we have a lot of people who are informed. What do we do with these people? Instead of constantly telling other people, okay, we have a certain amount of people, and now who are activized in a certain way. What can we do with these people? Can we organize them? Can we empower them? Instead of this, a lot of people are saying, no, no, we need to talk to more people. We need to go and to talk to more people and just create a stand, make sessions, make presentations, and so on and so forth. So this is another loop that kind of, if it is repeated too much, right, then it brings you back. It kind of anchors you, so you cannot go forward. Yeah. And finally, obviously, the most famous one, particularly in the climate movement, we need more research. We don't know exactly what is going on. So there was this new study, there was this new report about this particular technology of lithium or hydrogen or say what, and we don't know about it. And if we don't know enough, then we cannot act, right? Instead of saying, wait, there is a consensus on climate crisis. There is something called sufficient research to act, right? So this is the kind of question that you would have to unblock the escalation. What action is compatible with the knowledge, the existing knowledge? And this existing knowledge is obviously, first, it can be objective knowledge, knowledge that is available. And second, the knowledge that your organization has, right? So in these both aspects, you can ask, okay, we know something, it should send us to somewhere. If we know something, then we should be doing something about it. We cannot just think that we should know more about the things, right? So these are the kinds of handbrakes that stop escalation in the organization. And there are ways that you could do what I call patinage. I don't know how to say this. Like it's what the car does when you don't put the gears on, but you're still pushing the gas, right? So for instance, the best examples of this is that, oops, okay. Best example of this is that we will negotiate and we will continue negotiating. So my understanding of the Climate Action Network, which is a large federal network of climate NGOs throughout the world, is that they negotiate, then they negotiate, and then they negotiate more. And then every time they negotiate, every time there's a COP, a climate conference, they say this is not enough, this didn't work, but then the solution is to negotiate more, right? Okay, so community organizing is another example of going back to where you were, which is we'll reach more people, we'll talk to more people, and then this is going to be it. This is going to be the change itself. And finally, okay, this is better. Fine. An example of raising awareness is, for instance, all the think tanks. We will make another video. More people will know about it, or we'll make another report. Then more people will know about it, and then we'll do another report. So that's basically, this is the feeling I have about the global inequality reports, for instance. It's getting worse. More and more people know that it's getting worse. And then there's a new report next year. And the best example that I'd like to give is Gezi protests in Taksim, Istanbul in 2013. And I was there. This is why I want to give this example. In 2013, an urban park was supposed to be transformed into a shopping mall. So people went to the street saying, we need green spaces. There are so little of them in Istanbul already. So they went to the street, they camped, the police attacked, the people came back, the police attacked again, and the people came back again. The police attacked again. This is literally 28th of May, 29th of May, 30th of May, 31st of May, 1 million people came. Then they camped. Then the police went away. Now that was the camp. They were organizing other kinds of actions all across the country. So out of 8 million people in Turkey, 80 million people in Turkey, the government said that 8 million of them were mobilized through this process. This took all June and a little bit of July of 2013, but there was no organizing. There were action after action after action. And eventually the government consolidated its forces, gathered the police and attacked. And then there was no way of, when we lost one battle, like actual street barricade battle, there was no one to call us back in because we didn't have organizing and we didn't reach out to enough people. So there is, when I say patinage, you can be doing this everywhere, right? It's not just one part. If you don't follow the current, then you can always get stuck in either part of these stages. So to finish this conversation, maybe I'd like to give you some tools to invest in based on what you think your organization should be doing in this escalation, right? So for instance, if your organization is focused on mobilizing, if that's the task at hand, and if that's the theory of change, the kind of things that you'd like to be hearing about or learning about is action trainings, team building, like people that can act together in situations that are stressful, and also about social movement. So who does what and how can we build up a movement, right? When you're more focused on organizing, you'd be focusing on activist tools such as effective meetings, how to facilitate a meeting, how to do decisions together, how to listen to people, how to reach to more people. And you would also learn about networking and alliances, which is how can I talk to organized people who have different priorities and maybe different interests. So this is the kind of thing that you would be investing in. When you are focusing on awareness, the kind of things that you are focusing on would be media. How do I talk to media? How do I make sure that our message passes through the media? You can also produce your own media by image editing, video editing. Maybe you hire people to do that, or you train people to do that. And finally, you practice presentation techniques. So in that case, it could be to the public, it could be at schools, it could be wherever in a neighborhood, to your family. You learn how to convince other people, right? So this is the kind of thing that you would be investing in. And finally, if you are on the side of negotiation, then the kind of thing you need is expertise. You need to know the law. You need to know where the money is coming from, where the money is going to. Also, you need to make sure that you yourself, the organization, is enough institutionalized. It's part of the status quo, so it can negotiate with it, right? So you learn how to do, you learn how to write law, you know how to read law, but you also know how to negotiate, right, with decision makers. You know how to do lobbying, but you may also want to know how to write reports that are credible, right? So these are kind of, and when you look at it like this, obviously you understand, right, this is all good, right? We should be doing all of this. And this is exactly the confusion that happens in social movements, which is everyone is trying to do everything, which tells me that you may be missing the point of where you are supposed to be. And where I expect that someone got unmuted, and I'll ask tech support to kind of help me with that, please. Thank you, Mark. Excuse me for this. So all I was saying is that these tools are important, but the way you kind of put weight on some parts, first of all, actually, okay, let me say this other way. By looking at an organization and seeing what kind of investment they are doing, you can infer the theory of change of that organization. But also in your meetings, by looking at what kind of things people are saying, like we should do this, we should do that, you can understand where people see the change. But you can also do it the other way around. If you have a political position on, like, if you have a DNA text, like what your organization is, then maybe you can do it the other way around. Wait, our DNA says that we should not be the people who do the awareness. We should be doing something else. We should be, and we are not good at that. So maybe we should learn how to do that and things like this. So these are the kinds of logic that we had in hand. I think the presentation is this that we have. I would like to try and exit the presentation and come back to you. Let's see if I can success.
Looks like we lost Sinan. Let's just wait for a moment.
Sorry.
I think, oh, okay.
Excuse me, I'm using Linux, which is a bit of a confusing thing with Zoom, sorry. So this is where I will, I think, leave. we have, what, 15 minutes or more? What do we have? I don't remember when we're supposed to finish, in fact. Now we have 45 minutes. That's wonderful. So maybe one of the things that I'd like to do is to do a quick round of questions that you can, in terms of clarifying, and then maybe do a breakout room where we would give space to people to think about their own context and maybe share some experiences on like what you think is happening. One question is if you can have a copy of the presentation. The answer is yes. During the breakout rooms, I'll find the link for you and I'll then post it on the chat. I think it's already available online, at least a version of it, but I would have to look for it. So are there any questions to me or to Ines? I was wondering. You can put, okay, so the way to do this is, I guess it's good if you could put like a star in the chat if you want to talk, or rather just write down your questions. Either way it works. If you're raising your hand, I think we are too many people for me to see if someone raised a hand. So please don't use that function because I won't be able to see you. So there's one comment from Marcus or Marcus, depending on where you're from. So educating to educate is a sweet spot when enough people are educated. So then you can start to get action. But sometimes we need more. I mean, in general, we always need more. This is the entire point of this, right? It's that you genuinely always need more people. But you remember the first examples that Ines gave, which is what XR did wonderfully about momentum-driven organizing, which is they were doing XR talks to everyone to then organize them in affinity groups, then to do the actions, right? Or Fridays for Future is doing presentations at schools to then call for a strike. So it's, first of all, it's good to look at it that way rather than like, we'll go and tell people about climate change and then it's fine, right? First, there's that one, which is why are you educating people? And the second, I guess, is at all points, more people need education, but also good to ask, what can we do with the educated people or convince people, so on. Another Ines, would you like to answer any of the two questions that are on chat? Now it's 3.
I think you can continue answering the questions. It was going very well.
All right. So I think, so the question from Catherine is, where do you best differentiate between doing it all and doing what you can do best? Sometimes, I don't know, but I think something that raises a question that comes into my head is, sometimes we are doing best the wrong thing, right? Because most of us are prepared to talk to other people or to read. But maybe that's not where the change is supposed to be happening. Maybe we should be building up skills somewhere else. So that's one problem that kind of, it's a different angle to the same question, right? I'm avoiding the question, but I'm actually looking at the same thing. And the second is, there were 2 sessions that were canceled in the Global Just Recovery Gathering by ULEX project, which is the ecology of social movements, which is everyone has a role. I mean, obviously, we need Oxfam reports on inequality in order to mobilize people. It's wonderful that they are doing that. Like, there are loads of reports recently coming out about fossil gas, about fossil financing. All of those things are wonderful for us. So we have to make sure that those things are articulated in the right way, and someone who is good at it is doing that part. but is also talking to us, and we are talking to them. So they feed each other, right? So I think this is also answering Sasha's question, which is how can they feed each other in a way? So actually, I'm reading this question only now, so it's really good that actually we are thinking in the same way. It is true that things can feed each other, but it is also true that things can stop it and cancel out each other, right? Because there are different tactical moments in escalation, which is sometimes you say, system doesn't work, we have to go to the street. And if someone says, wait, let me talk to the system now, that's not maybe the right thing to do, because then they are canceling each other, right? Oh, there was a meeting with some groups of civil society and the government, so we don't have to, and then there was a press release and everything was solved. However, when you look at the Z, like if someone talks and comes out and says they're not doing it, that can be mobilizing. It's true, right? And it's also the same with all the other points of the escalation. It is true that they can feed each other if they are articulated, but I think more importantly, independent of what you are doing, where are you looking at? Because if you're looking at one spot and you say, I'm going to change this through this, you may be in deep trouble. This happens a lot, in fact, with Turkish women who have this idea that the domestic violence will be solved inside the family. So they refuse to organize with other women. And others do. And when they do, independent of whether they do actions about it, right? But independent of how they organize, at some point, they can realize that actually talking to other people, going beyond the given framework, can empower you and actually protect you. But that doesn't mean you should stop talking to the guy. You should always be talking to the guy. I mean, right? Like, this is the idea of escalation. You should be escalating, but you should never let go. I mean, you can let go, you can move forward, but that should happen at a later stage. And there are more questions. I'd like to let Ines talk about any one of them, please.
I'm sorry, I was just like listening to your responses, and I was kind of lost focus, because it's interesting, because we've made this presentation a lot, but I don't think we've had as many questions as we've had here ever. So well, we have a question from Fatima, which is, how can content, for example, videos, blog posts, social posts, be more effective in either mobilizing people or empowering to do something? For example, signing a petition. I think if videos are connected to the actual mobilizations, and if they focus on the image of the mobilization, and on passing also the feeling of the mobilization, so as to focus on calling people for the next one, and for and also helping in naturalizing certain phases of escalation. I think that can be a very useful thing. For example, I think what XR did about more or less naturalizing civil disobedience in this context, in this actual, in this current context, is very useful. And the videos they produce are a good way to pass that image and to normalize it on people's heads, and eventually help to actually mobilize more people for something as a blockade. If people didn't have that kind of reference, maybe it would be harder to actually bring people to the streets to participate in that kind of action. So that can be useful. So I think I pass back to you, Sinan.
Sure. So I'll just gather a lot of questions and give one kind of generic answer about the question of everyone has a role, quote unquote, right? This thing of everyone is doing well, everything is fine. And another thing is about when different movements have different different ways of seeing it. And plus what Ines was saying about a function somewhere, how can it be served? So I think, how can it serve to somewhere else? I think in general, the question is framing, because everyone has a role in what? What is supposed to be happening? And there, like, how will change happen? And then what is your role in it is one question. The other question is, I have a role. So these are completely different questions, right? Because one is a political question. It's about like change can happen anywhere, anyway, in any form, everything is well. The other thing is we will have to mobilize. So this is, I think the good example is Naomi Klein's book, This Changes Everything. There's a chapter on bad timing. And it's about this thing of how flexible the status quo is today, and therefore what it will take us to make the change. So if we agree on that, then we make sure that we have to mobilize. Then given that we have to mobilize, some of us will have to do the memes, some of us will have to go to the neighborhoods, some of us will have to do the direct actions, but we are all doing this to mobilize, right? So I think this is the main point of the framing of the actual theory of change, where you are at, and then you say, okay, I'm good at this, but I'm better doing this towards that. I think that's the kind of idea that we have. And there are situations where this is not reconcilable. So I do believe that when feminist movement says it's not just politics, it's also culture, it's embedded, deeply rooted. So people will also have to change, which means we need bigger organizations. And it also works a bit in terms of racism. Also, although in racism, it's much more like institutions are showing off their racism. When women say we need to empower ourselves independent of policy change is important, but there's also a lot of cultural change that needs to happen. Then I understand that it's not the same as, for instance, minimum wage, a struggle for minimum wage. There is really a discrepancy of where we see things, and I think this is why this all intersectional debates are happening, because you see that certain things are really, they have their roots entangled, but they are different roots. So it's really not that trivial in terms of holistic theories of change, at least not at a large scale. Some groups may agree to have an approach that says, we do this and it solves everything at once. But in some cases, it's possible that, for instance, if you look at the status quo as a thing, as a structure, as a political structure, then you may have difficulty in looking at your partner, the person you're in love with, and there, this entire debate of personal is political and so on. Like there's this all other issue that needs to be addressed as well. So it's really not trivial to solve this. There's a question about authoritarian governments or regimes. I think that's an interesting question. However, you may have seen that in this presentation, we are not assuming a democratic framework. The framework that we are proposing includes things like the Cuban Revolution, the Kurdish movement, the Bolshevik Revolution, and together, as well as all the campaigns that happened and all the other movements that happened. So it's not really, or Ines gave the 25 of April, which was the overthrow of the Portuguese fascist government. So the mobilizing aspect and how you reach to there and what mobilizing actually means is really not, we're not necessarily limiting social movement into everything will happen in this democracy where we live in, right? But we are also not doing, so this is also curious, we're also not assuming that social movement is a good thing, right? There was this example of, like social massacre as part of theories of change. And so like, there's also that possibility that it escalates for extreme right. They organize, they raise awareness, they convince people, they organize those people, and then they start burning houses of immigrants in Germany. Like, think of, we are looking at it from a methodological angle and not necessarily from in our context only. So I think these are the answers that I'd like to give, and then I'd like to give you maybe some 20 minutes in breakout room. Someone is asking if you will do that, and I would very much like to give space for people to talk about this. We will not have a chance to get back everything you say, but if you take notes and share it on the chat, you can. I would like to keep that. But otherwise, I would like to ask for the tech support team to have a 20 minutes breakout room, as many as like maybe 4 to 5 people, up to 8 maybe, in random groups. So you can just like, what's the questions, the guiding questions that we would like to ask you is, in your organization or in your context or whatever you are looking at, maybe you are looking at it from a distance. You have been going to their events, but you're not in it. Maybe you are in it. Maybe you are an organizer. What is the theory of change? And are you doing the right thing based on the theory of change, based on the problem, based on the flexibility of the status quo? Do you think you are investing in the right thing and you're doing the right kind of actions? And are you framing the actions in the right way? So I think this is the kind of question that I'd like to ask to people, and would like to give you 20 minutes for this. And the breakout rooms can start now. And we'll stay here. So let's have a look at what we missed. We missed stuff, right? Ines, could you see if we have the slides in Climaximo's?
In Klima, okay, because I thought that I was looking at Feedloop to see if there was some kind of link, but we can send the
All right, no, that's also good. In the exhibitors portal, I think we can put files there. You are a manager of our stand.
Yeah, I know. We have the slides there, but they are private. But I think I can maybe upload them again and put that not private. Okay, I'll do that then.
Try, see that, and in the meantime, we check. Also, I'll check the website to see if I get a link. I think in the website we have it also only in the wrong language. I'll see about that. Yeah, it's here. I think the one that I want to give is here.
Then should I upload this to Feedloop or not?
You should, yes.
Okay.
What are we supposed to be doing again? Sorry.
Hi. We are in breakout rooms now.
Yeah, I left the breakout room because I forgot what else to
Oh
do.
yeah, all right. Okay, so the question is, you got all of this, of the polls and the escalation and so on. So the question is, if you are in an organization or if you're looking at some movements or organizations, what do you think their theory of change is? And do you think they are doing the right thing based on the, like, are they doing the thing based on their theory of change, according to their theory of change? Yeah.
Okay.
Or if they're, maybe they're investing in the wrong side, or maybe they're, you know, maybe they are distracted, maybe they are doing well, exactly. They're investing in the right part and so on.
Okay, awesome. Giant breakout.
Hi, sorry, I also joined late. Which
Hey.
organizations are you talking about?
We are talking about basically your organizations. So the things that you may be in, or things that you may be following, or you're an organizer of, and so on. So we made this presentation of theories of change and conflict escalation, and how, like, what kind of theories of change organizations may have actually, and what they are doing. And this is happening in breakout rooms. Maybe you'd like to join one, and
Yeah, sure, thank you.
yeah, you're welcome.
I'm not entirely sure what is the link that I should give to people. If
No, the link I have, it's the 3A or something. It's in the slides da apresentações on the website. But otherwise, we'll just say that it's in the exhibitors portal, if that's what you're asking.
okay.
Hello, may I ask something?
Please do.
I've been assigned to room 15, but when I join, there's no one.
Cool. Maybe tech support could help you get invited to a different room.
That's absolutely fine. Sorry, I just had to go to one of the breakout rooms to someone else help. Sorry, I caught the end of that. Who is speaking? Who wants to be reassigned?
Gökhan.
Gökhan. Okay, one
Yes.
second.
I can write my name into chat.
Oh, you're in 15. Okay, sure. Yeah, I'll put you. Okay, one second. Okay, I've put you into room 3. That should work.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
And my name's Anya. Could you please assign me as well? I joined late, sorry. AINE.
Oh.
Yeah, absolutely. One second. Okay, I will put you into room 4. There you go. Is there anyone else that's just recently joined who would like to join one of the breakout discussions? I can see there's a few people unassigned who are in the room at the moment. Just let me know.
Ariel is telling us, Ariel Capistrano, that no one is in room 1. So maybe you could assign them also into a different room. Ariel Capistrano.
Yeah,
I'm reading
okay.
the chat.
Okay. Corpus.
John Felbandiala from Philippines is asking to join room 12. John fell to room 12.
John, I will do that right.
Yeah, and Finn is asking us that they just joined and have no idea what you're talking about. Right. So we made this session started maybe a bit longer than an hour ago, and we started with some presentations by myself and Dinesh on theories of change in conflict escalation. The initial presentation was then we kind of answered some questions also about it.
What the hell is
And
John?
and now we sent people to breakout rooms to discuss what they heard about in their own context. So maybe Finn J could be invited to any room to hear what's going on in there, even though you may miss some of the context. It may still be nice to continue hearing people. The session will last for another 20 minutes anyway. Yeah, so Finn J could be invited to any room that is
Yeah.
available.
Yeah, done that. Thanks. Thanks, Sinan.
Ines, would you like to say last words?
I don't know.
Think about what you want to say.
Okay.
So tech support is asking if there's anyone who'd like to join into a breakout discussion now. Please say so in the chat or on the mic. Mark, could you tell me how much time is left in the breakout rooms, perhaps?
Yeah, so we've had 10, oh, wow, actually, no, we've had 15 minutes already. Yeah, 5 minutes left.
Cool. Thanks a lot. Mark, can you remind me if there's a half an hour break after the session, or if I'm looking at the wrong paper?
Yeah, you're right. There is. Yeah. So there's the, I think it's on the script to just give a reminder.
Yeah, I don't have that script, but I'll tell people. Yes, I remember that there's a script. I know more or less what I'm supposed to say, but I don't have the script with me. Sorry.
One
But it's okay.
second.
You don't. No.
I've
I
actually.
have it. I have
Okay.
it, so it's okay.
So maybe you say it.
Yeah, it's all right.
Yay, cool. Thanks a lot. So what I'd like to do is to acknowledge the things that we are not going to answer. And then I want to answer a few things. But before, I'd like to let people like share what they said in the chat rapidly and give people a couple of minutes to read those things. And I'll answer a few things and I'll pass it on to you, Ines, to say whatever you want to say, do the script thing about the break, and just close.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay, I'm just going to send a notification to the groups now that they've got 60 seconds left, and then they'll come back into the room. Is that okay? Cool.
Yes. Hello, welcome back, everyone. We'll just wait a couple of seconds, but everyone who were in the breakout rooms can join back into the room. So I hope you had a productive and inspiring moment of sharing your own thoughts about it and your experiences. Unfortunately, well, fortunately, you have facilitators that would like to give you a proper break, which means we would like you to share whatever came up in your discussions in the chat so everyone can have a look at it. But we want to those feedback loops of everyone telling. And I do agree that it was very short. I think it's always this kind of discussion. It's always very short. So there was one technical question about the presentation. The presentation is in Climaximo's exhibitor space. We put a copy of it, but you can also get it in this page of Climaximo's website. You just have to scroll down a little bit until you get the PDF of theories of change and conflict escalation. So this is one thing that I wanted to say. So I kindly ask you to share whatever you would like everyone else to hear in the chat. What was being said, what you think everyone else should hear. And while you were doing the breakout, I was going back to the chat to see the questions. So I'd like to try and address them. So one of them is, so first thing I want to say maybe is, how do you differentiate what is the best theory of change in what context? And my answer is that I don't. That's what you do. And it also depends on the context in which you are in, the status quo at the given moment, the task at hand. Like, I would strongly recommend you that not to start a family conflict with a hunger strike, right? Like, maybe start something, maybe try something else first. You know what I mean? Like, there are, so the context really defines what is the best theory of change. That's what I was trying to say. And the other thing is that I'd like to acknowledge certain things that are not addressed in this session and will not be addressed in this session. One was about inclusiveness for various kinds of disability and organizing. This was a very good question. We won't be able to give an answer. Another one is how we deal with conflict within the group. I'm aware that there are many sessions on this subject in the gathering. I strongly encourage you to join those sessions. And finally, also sustainability of the movement and burnout. There are various very good sessions that I am very much curious about. We won't cover that subject also here. If the link shows an error message, refresh, because our servers are not as strong as they should be. And finally, a question that I would answer is how you train people about these subjects to kind of identify and resolve different kinds of understanding about where people should go if there is no DNA text in the beginning or something. So, which is that, don't do it. Do it later. So I think the kind of abstraction about these theories of change, strategy, and so on, start making sense after you are exposed to various tactics and various narratives, right? Someone does an action or an event and then tell about what happened in that event. And then when you build up several of these things, you kind of have the idea of abstraction. So do it later. Do it at a stage where people have a lot of examples in their hand, either by looking at them or by actually doing them. And it may be very difficult, particularly in spontaneous organizing. It may be very difficult to actually come into a consensus of where your organization should be going. It's slightly easier if there is some kind of orientation in the beginning, but I understand that it's a really challenging situation. So now I'll pass to Ines to say a few words, maybe. Also, thanks a lot for people who are sharing what they have discussed. So we have a bit of time also to look at those feedbacks. So I'll pass on to Ines now.
Thank you, Sinan. First of all, I'd like to thank you for.
Can you hear me?
You all for, yes.
Hello.
Colin, do you want to speak? I'm not sure if Colin wants to speak or if he just unmuted himself unwillingly. Please, Colin, if you want to speak, can you put a sign in the... Oh, okay, so Colin muted himself, I guess. I'm confused. Anyway, so I was saying that I'd like to thank everyone for attending this session. I'd also like to stress the importance of looking at our own organizations and identifying our own theory of change and the way that this theory of change articulates with the strategies that we're building. In fact, what Sinan was saying is very true, that we can learn a lot through action and through testing different tactics. But I think there are moments in which we've grown enough to actually be able to look at our own organizations and have a consciousness about what we are really doing and put that forward and make that explicit. So I think it's a very important exercise to do, and I think also these kinds of events like what we're having here are good moments to put that forward and to make that kind of reflection together with several other people from different parts of the world and from very different organizations who are gathered here with the same purpose in mind. I also feel that the climate movement, since it's been going on for decades, it's very important to recognize what has been attempted, what works, what doesn't work. And there are two facts that are absolutely crucial to help us evaluate what works and what doesn't, and what we have to do from now on, which are the fact that we have very, very little time left, the urgency factor, and the fact that several theories of change, which we talked about in here, and which were based on the possibility of convincing the status quo to change, have been proved didn't work throughout these decades, which is the reason that we are in this moment here and that we have so very little time left. So I think having this in mind is very important to trace and reinvent the climate movement and trace our way towards what we are going to do next. And well, I invite you to keep thinking about these questions after the session, and also keep analyzing other things that that we're going to be exposed to in the other sessions through these kinds of lenses and through these critical lenses. So I think we're going to finish now. I think there's going to be a 30-minute break. You can connect also with people in a networking lounge. You can develop the conversations that you were having in the breakout rooms, or talk about other things, of course. Or we can you can also take a break from screens, because today we're going to be in front of the screen for a long time. So it's also a good idea. Then we'll have the movement story sessions with stories of movement work from around the globe. And you can find those on the conference website. They'll start 15 minutes past the hour. So thank you again, and I hope to see you, some of you, in other sessions.
Thank
Bye.
you.